Hello again, baseball lovers. Jason with you with the RAB podcast season recap episode. And we have a new look this week as our regular guy, Bruce, is out. So we had to pull in a pinch hitter, and he's going to join us. I'll introduce him in just a second. What we're going to do with this episode is just look back at the 2025 MLB season and talk about just a myriad of subjects, including our take on who the biggest winners and losers were this year, also our take on the postseason awards, and maybe a small look ahead to the 2026 season as well. So, as usual, I got my guy Nico with me, Nico Malika. Welcome back, Nico, for another great week. And then we got our special guest, Josh. Josh, I am going to probably mess up your last name. I should have asked you before we start recording. I will let you tell us, Josh. How do you pronounce your last name?
It's Kermie, just like the frog. Make it easy.
Okay, Kermie, just like the frog. I like it. Okay, I would have had it right. It just seemed too easy to go.
I know.
All right.
Trust me, I've heard
Awesome.
them all.
Awesome. All right. So Josh Kermie, Nico Malika. We're going to kick it off here. We're going to talk a little bit, guys. Let's talk about winners and losers. And we're talking about just the season as a whole. And you can pick any teams here you want to or players. Who were the big winners? Who were the big losers? Nico, let's kick it off with you, man. What's your view on the 2025 season, winners and losers?
Hey, man. Welcome, Josh, to the RAB podcast. Glad to have him on board. I think he's going to be a huge asset for the team. So big picture, let's start with the losers. I think we talked about it a lot throughout the course of the season. As Jason, Bruce, and I have talked about, I think the two teams that had the overwhelming disappointing seasons were American League, obviously Baltimore. Obviously they had previously the year prior, they were a playoff team. They had a really good nucleus of players, and I would say a window to win for Baltimore, and they took a huge step back. So I think Baltimore is probably the biggest loser in the American League. There's a lot of rumors now going on with Adley Rutschman. Is he going to be the future catcher of the team? They have, serious pitching issues, but they still have a good team going into the future, a young nucleus. But I think they're the biggest loser in the American League, considering how open the American League was. And for the National League, I take no pride in saying that, as my pal on the screen is a diehard Braves fan. But I think the biggest loser was the Braves in the National League. It's a culmination of a lot of things. Injuries played a part, but overall, I think, they kind of imploded early on in the season and they couldn't catch any ground. We were just kind of waiting around all summer for the Braves to get back to 500 and put together a little bit of a winning streak. And when you look at how the season went, Jason, and then how Cincinnati went to the playoffs as an 83-win team, you kind of say to yourself, wow, Atlanta couldn't have done that. Atlanta, they should have been that team to squeak in. Certainly had the talent to do that. So I think Atlanta is a very disappointing team, but I do think both teams still have a window to win. And I think there are two teams going into the winter to look out for with some of these free agents, because I think if you're Mike Elias in Baltimore, you got to be aggressive and you got to go out there and address your pitching. And then if you're Atlanta, I mean, I think they have such a great opportunity to go after a Bo Bichette or a Dylan Cease. It requires spending money, and for some reason, Atlanta has been a little, picky with their spending. Obviously they've paid some of their superstars like Ronald Acuna Jr., which they had to, and then Austin Riley got the big contract, and Matt Olson. So I think Atlanta's in an interesting spot going into free agency, because I think they can be right back there, by the springtime as a contender again. And same with Baltimore. I think Baltimore has an opportunity to address those needs and be a competitive team in the American League, because the American League is the lesser of two. And I think Baltimore has a chance to rebound and have a positive season next year. But definitely the two losers in American and National. I don't know if you want to let Jason speak to the losers before I get into the winners. I kind of rambled on there a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get Josh's thought. I real quick, as a Braves fan, I have plenty to say about the 2025 season, but I'm going to save it for the. I'm going to revive the Braves podcast I started, but plenty to say. I do think the Braves are going to spend some money from the signals we're getting from the front office. I hope they do. But yeah, more to come on that. But Josh, let's turn it over to you. Let's get your thoughts on. Let's start with losers, and we'll flip it back to winners.
Sounds good. Yeah. I wrote down a few teams here. So, even talking about in season, the Mets, the Mets were obviously a big loser to me. I mean, you start off to that 45-24, best record in the majors as of June 12th, and then you just completely collapse in season. I thought that was obviously with their payroll, bringing in Soto and spending all that money, just a huge loss of a season. With that, you're like, hey, we should be in the playoffs, especially once you get off to that start. Another team that jumped out at me that may not be one that a lot of people thought of is the Giants, especially after that Devers trade. They were 13 games over 500. Sorry about the head, Nico. They were 13 games over 500 when they make that trade. And they end up the season 81-81 after they bring in Devers, obviously take on that whole payroll and anticipate like, hey, we're kind of going for it. Now I know that probably happened on them, maybe not preseason. They probably didn't think they were going to be getting Rafael Devers, but I thought that was a big loss that you make that trade and then you seemingly end up 500. I kind of grouped two teams together, and we've already talked about one of them, the Braves, and the Rangers. I mean, two top 10 payrolls, a lot of preseason expectations. And obviously, we already talked about one at length, and Jason's going to talk about them more, but just neither of them panned out. The Rangers had some kind of threats like, hey, we're going to make the playoffs, but you could just kind of tell with the Mariners how they were playing, and the Astros, they didn't make it, but they were playing better, that it just wasn't going to happen for the Rangers.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. I would also add a couple teams that did make the playoffs. The Phillies. I feel like that window could be closing. Now, I know that the Phillies are willing to spend. They're willing to make moves to keep that team competitive. Certainly, if they bring Schwarber back, they're still in good shape, but there's no guarantee there. They do need Bryce Harper, by the way, to be kind of superstar MVP Bryce Harper again. I mean, he got called out, I guess, by his GM and recently, but they do need that Bryce Harper. So I think the Phillies, it was World Series or bust, and they didn't make it. And I think the Padres are missing a window. The Padres got there. They did go 5 with the Cubs, so they didn't go out getting swept. But I think the Padres window is also closing. So I think when we talk about teams that have a window open, I think those are two teams that not wasted opportunity. Well, in the Phillies case, kind of a wasted opportunity. I thought they had the best team all year. I picked the Phillies to go to the World Series. 2 years in a row, the Phillies have let me down. Nico, let's circle back. Let's do some positive talk real quick. Let's talk about, who are your winners?
Yeah, so I agree with those picks on the losers. Look, I mean, there's one team essentially that's the biggest winner at the end of the season, right? So there's going to be a culmination of a lot of teams that are very disappointed in their seasons. Reason why I picked Baltimore and Atlanta, because I think both teams were World Series contenders coming into the season. But so with winners, man, I'm going to sound pretty simplistic here. It's not, necessarily recency bias. I think obviously the biggest winner in the American League, I can't help but pick the Blue Jays. Kind of, again, 74-win team season a year ago. To be able to come into the season this year with all the doubters and the uncertainty. Obviously when they extended Vladdy Jr., that was a sign that, hey, look, they're still going for it. There was a time when Toronto was still on the fence of, hey, do we keep Vladdy or is he possibly trade bait? And there was a lot of questions with Toronto coming into the season. The coaching staff, the general manager's been tenured there. So I think they're the biggest winners in the American League. I'd be able to just kind of beat up the American League throughout the course of the season and then just go on this incredible playoff run where they basically were inches away from winning the World Series. Now, I understand they lost the World Series and there's a lot of disappointment when it comes with that. But I think this is still a team that's set up to win in the future. They are a top 5 payroll in the sport, and they have shown that they are interested in, spending and improving their team. Obviously, a guy like Bo Bichette's going to be a free agent, and some other guys. But I think Toronto is a big winner. I know Seattle, talked about in the pre-show, being able to get to the 7th game of the American League Championship Series is incredible. Obviously, first time in franchise history. So that was a big step for them. I think it's a winning season for them, but I still think that they could have potentially, got over the hump there. But I would go with Toronto in the National League. I can't help but pick the Dodgers, man. I just feel like, throughout the whole season, we had our shows and we kept saying to ourselves, the Dodgers, they don't look like the team that maybe we thought they were going to be this season. A lot of times the narrative in sport is in sports and all of sports really is, you win that championship and you have a hangover, right? Like the Texas Rangers had it. It had sports. It's very hard to repeat, no matter how great of a team you have. And I got to go with the Dodgers because of the fact that the regular season didn't mean a whole lot. They won their division. They had a little bit of a more difficult route in the postseason, but they're clearly the class of baseball. And at the moment, they are the team to beat. So I got to go with the Dodgers in the National League and the Blue Jays in the American League.
Yeah, hard not to pick those teams. When it comes to the Dodgers, depth is what I think of. They had pitching injuries throughout the year that actually ended up working to their advantage because those guys got hurt for a while. They had other guys that could step in and keep them in first place. And then a lot of those guys were a little fresher come the postseason. They'd thrown less pitches and it showed a lot of times. It carried them throughout the postseason. So as far as the Blue Jays, they were my dark horse pick to be a playoff team. I liked that lineup. I wasn't sure about their pitching. Pitching turned out to be pretty good. And I agree. The Blue Jays still seem to be set up, but I worry about the hangover for them from that disappointment. Will it drive them to try to get back, or will it be like it's got to seem like a mountain you got to reclimb? You climbed it once, you got within literally inches of winning the World Series, and now you got to go through spring training and 162 and another playoff run. So we'll see how it works out for them. Josh, let's talk winners. Who were your winners for 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, have a few teams here. I wrote down the Blue Jays absolutely with a lot of points that, great points that Nico had. I mean, you get Vladdy to sign that $500 million deal and you come through the next season. And I mean, the season before they're 74 and 88 after coming up a real disappointment of a season, right?
Yep.
Get him to sign and, and make this run. And all along, you find this guy Yusevich out of nowhere who started the year in A-ball that has the looks like he could be, possibly at least a 2, a 3, if not maybe a 1, right?
Absolutely.
At the top of your rotation. So I mean that's and of course, I mean then you just get guys like Addison Barger and Clement. I mean, and Varsho. Those guys were. I watched them when they were in Detroit, and I said to a couple, and I think I said in the chat, this is just going to be a tough team because of the fits that they can just give pitchers, or they gave pitchers. And to your absolute point, I mean, how do you back it up? And I mean, the AL East, that's tough when you're facing the Red Sox and then the Yankees and then seemingly the Rays, who make magic almost every year, something out of nothing. That's hard, to say, to necessarily, I feel, evaluate every year to say, yes, we do spend a lot, which they do. But man, that's a tough division, and to come into that and close, that had to be tough. I also think the Mariners were, I know that's tough because they also ultimately didn't get, they didn't get to the series losses. But the first division went since 2001. I feel as a fan, coming especially from a Detroit fan, you got to have some realistic expectations here on what is a winning season or what they're going to do. Yeah. That was huge for them to do that. Huge hump to get over, beat those Astros. And they took it the whole 9 yards against the Blue Jays. I also think the Reds were a winner. First year with Francona making the playoffs again. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a team that you're, I guess, again, these are subjective kind of thoughts here. And again, and also the Red Sox. I mean, you trade Devers, you seemingly punt the season, right? Or that's what everyone was saying in June when they
Yeah.
make that moves. Oh, they're punting the season. They're done. I mean, they get these guys, all those young guys, right? Rafaela, Duran, and the rest of it, Roman Anthony, and they make the playoffs. And seemingly they signed Crochet, right, to that now that looks like a steal,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And he was, I mean, again, coming from a Tiger fan, there's a possible argument that he could have grabbed that trophy, right? From
Yeah.
Terry. I mean, there's at least a little bit of one.
He was good. Yeah. He was really
For
good.
sure. I mean, so I think and now they have all this money freed up. Like, I mean, yeah, they can get Bregman. I mean, even if they wanted to call up Tucker, they could now that that money's there. I mean, I'm not saying they will, but
Yeah.
they got options. And I know they need pitching, but it was definitely a win for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nico hit the nail on the head. We've said it before, but only one team is going to be happy out of 30 at the end of the year.
Right.
I think based on preseason expectations and franchise expectations, there's different levels of success. I mean, for Seattle, I think this was a really great year. I know it was disappointing the way it ended, but it was a great season. They made the playoffs. They got to Game 7 of the ALCS. Cal Raleigh has the big year. Wins the home run derby. I mean, just a lot of really good things happen for Seattle. That's a great season. You flip it, and I go back to the Phillies, and you can put the Yankees in this category. You can put the Braves in this category. Those are franchises that are at a point where it's World Series or bust. And if you don't get there, it's kind of a bad season. I mean, I hate to say it, as much as you accomplished in the regular season, if you're the Phillies, what if the Dodgers hadn't won the World Series, right? I mean, all the money that they spend, people would have been talking about that lineup that they have, the incredible top to bottom. And you have Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Shohei Ohtani on a team. It's almost unfair. So you're expected to win, right? So if the Dodgers hadn't won, that would have been a disappointment. But for a team like Seattle, Cincinnati, great point, Josh, great point there. It's a great year. I mean, and even though Toronto is still probably heartbroken of the way it ended, that's a great season for the Blue Jays. So I think preseason expectations have a lot to say when we talk about, good season, bad season. So let's extend that. Let's talk some awards. It's award season. They've all been handed out. We'll start with the rookies of the year. I was a little surprised, to be honest. I am a Braves fan, but I did not think that Drake Baldwin was going to take home the NL trophy, but he did. And then Nick Kurtz takes it home for the AL. So I want to get you guys' thoughts. Are these the guys you think should have brought it home? Or did you have another pick, or just your overall thoughts? Nico, we'll start with you.
The one bright spot for the Atlanta Braves in 2025 was Drake Baldwin. I know that maybe not so many fans have heard of him. He kind of went under the rug a little bit, but I was impressed by his season. He's a promising young player. I would have voted for him. I totally agree with that. It kind of to bounce that off with the current Brave situation. I'm curious if they're going to hang on to Sean Murphy. I mean, I know that Murph's been a guy they've been rumored to possibly move. I think he's got 1 year left on his contract with the Braves, or is it maybe more than that, Jason?
I want to say it's more than one, but there are some discussions. I think I've heard I've read some rumors. As a Braves fan, I'll tell you, I wish they would move him if they could get, a decent return and get rid of that contract. He's been a disappointment. Overall, he's been hurt a lot, which is, understand it's not his fault, but some players just seem to have that penchant for getting hurt. So, yeah, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. On the other hand, if you've got depth at catcher, that's valuable. So one guy doesn't have to catch 160 games, but I wouldn't mind seeing them move him. And I think that's on the table if they get the right return, Nico, just to answer your question.
Yeah, I didn't mean to get off on tangent there, but I know that the Braves have always operated on a kind of a two-catcher man situation previous years with Travis d'Arnaud, and they've kind of always done it under their leadership there. But, yeah, I'm in agreement with Drake Baldwin. As far as Kurtz, yeah, I mean, that was an incredible season he had for the A's. He put on some shows out there in Sacramento and the AAA ballpark that they played in this season. So yeah, I mean, not a whole lot to really harp on there too much. I think both guys are well deserving of the awards.
Josh, your thoughts on the rookies of the year?
Yeah, I pretty much really agree with Nico on that. Kind of not much terribly to drill down to, in my opinion on that. Kurtz, obviously, I mean, unanimous. I think that was pretty much a given. The guy had, 36 and 86 and 117 games. I mean, that's pretty crazy for a rookie to come in and do. And even a 290 batting average. So it's not like he wasn't getting on, he was getting on base and hitting the ball. As far as Baldwin and against Horton, I know that obviously I'm even somewhat close to Chicago, so I get some of that. But I mean, I think what hurt Horton started off with a 3.98 ERA in May and then a 5.47 in June. I think that these people that vote are finicky. I think that kind of turned them off. And kind of killed because you got to get steam early for that. I think for the most part on kind of these awards and stuff like that, it's really hard to kind of come out from behind the eight ball. So I just think that hurt him. And obviously, I mean, unfortunately, just like I saw, seen it before guys do it to some Tigers, but I saw, Baldwin towards the end of the season when Tigers trying to get that division and they failed. Baldwin had a heck of a series here in Detroit. I mean, he did. I mean, multiple homers and everything like that. So definitely agree with them and kind of can see where they're coming from.
Yeah, I was just looking. A lot of upset Cubs fans. So I do want to give some love to Cade Horton. I mean, he was 11-4 at a 2.67 ERA, a 1.085 WHIP. He pitched 118 innings, so that's a good sample size for a youngster. Only allowed 10 homers, struck out 97 to 33 walks. So you can't argue with those numbers. But I think you hit the nail on the head. The early season, the June swoon that he had. Baldwin was pretty consistent all year. I mean, I'm sure like every batter, he had ups and downs, but I think his consistency throughout the year is probably what carried the day. Horton did get 9 first place votes, and Baldwin 21. I don't have a lot to say about Nick Kurtz. I just try to say his name very carefully. But he's super impressive. And the second guy in the voting was his teammate. Kurtz was unanimous. Wilson was second. That's a good young core for the A's if they don't screw it up. We know it's the A's, so we'll have to wait and see. Wilson actually, had a higher batting average, but obviously Kurtz with the power, 36 home runs, very impressive. He slugged 619, so you'll take that all day long if you're the Sacramento / Las Vegas / just A's, whatever they might be. So yeah, I don't have a problem either way. Obviously, as a Braves fan, super excited. The rookie of the year for Baldwin gets the Braves an extra draft pick as well. So that's always, I think people overlook that. That's a big deal. Let's move on to the Cy Young. This may be the quickest segment. I don't know. You mentioned Garrett Crochet, Josh, maybe, but I mean, it's hard to argue with Tarek Skubal. It's hard to argue with Paul Skeens. Seems pretty obvious, I think. No surprises here. Skeens is fun to watch. A lot of chatter going on about Skeens being stuck in Pittsburgh and a losing environment, a losing culture. Somebody's out there saying he wants to go play for the Yankees. As somebody who loves the game of baseball, I would love to see the Pittsburgh Pirates get back to relevance. I just don't know if they're close. And as somebody who loves baseball, I'd love to see Paul Skeens pitch in the postseason. So I'd hate to see him leave Pittsburgh. I know that's got to be a downer for the Pirates if he does. But, man, this guy in the postseason with a good team would be a lot of fun to watch. And then Skubal, he can't do it by himself out there in Detroit. He needs some help. But, man, what a fun guy to watch pitch. He's dominant. So, you guys, let's start back to Nico. Your thoughts on the Cy Young Awards.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think you really can't argue. I mean, these two guys are like must-watch TV. Every time I see Skubal or Skeens pitching, every fifth day, it's just a treat to watch it, man. These guys are just, they're the two best pitchers in baseball at this moment. I do want to pick up on what Josh said a little earlier in the show. Garrett Crochet had an absolutely incredible season, and it shouldn't go overshadowed that, he didn't win the Cy Young. If Skubal didn't exist or if he was injured or something of that nature, Garrett Crochet would win the Cy Young, and he would be absolutely deserving of it. He was a beast for Boston the entire season. It just so happens that Tarek Skubal is just a little bit better, maybe more than a little bit, but he just more consistency throughout the course of the season. I know Skubal maybe was a little rocky towards the end, a couple of bad starts, but overall Skubal was pretty much flawless. In the National League, Skeens, it's going to be interesting what happens with Paul Skeens, because I don't want to sound like the bad guy on the show, but he's not going to be a Pirate for much longer. It's not going to happen. He's going to get pride away. I don't believe in the Pirates to bring a winning team in 26 or 27 and beyond. He's a huge asset for them. Could they sign him? Could they give him a contract? Maybe. I just judging by his demeanor and his desire to win, it's just not going to happen in Pittsburgh, man. And I feel like it's inevitable that he's going to end up in the Pinstripes, or maybe out in LA, or maybe, who knows, maybe the Mets. It just seems inevitable. I would love to see him stay in Pittsburgh, but they just, I see a flashback of Garrett Cole. Garrett Cole was once a Pittsburgh Pirate. Nobody remembers that, though. Everyone just thinks of Garrett Cole on the Astros and now the Yankees.
Yep. So
I think that they're kind of a mirror image of each other. And I expect Skeens to move on, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big storyline as we move forward, the Skeens situation. Let me say this. I just pulled Baseball Reference. Skubal and Crochet. So, Josh, I'll let you listen to this and then you kick in. WAR, 6.5, Skubal, 6.3, Crochet. They were pretty even. Innings pitched, a few more by Crochet. Skubal, 13-6. Crochet, 18-5. I don't even know if we pay attention to wins and losses anymore for pitchers. ERA, Skubal, 2.21. Crochet, 2.59. ERA plus, 187. Skubal, 159. Crochet. Crochet had a few more strikeouts, 255 to 241. K percentage, walk rate were both in favor of Skubal. Here's what's crazy to me. Garrett Crochet's whip. I'm a big whip fan. I like whip better than ERA. 1.028, which is a fantastic whip.
Look at Skubal.
Skubal's 0.891.
Led the majors.
I mean, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, two fantastic pitchers, but I think the right guy got the award. But, kudos to Crochet. But Skubal's just on another level right now. And there's a certain aspect to that award for me. To be the man, you got to beat the man. And Skubal was the man last year, and you got to take it away from him. And nobody did quite enough to do that. So it's Skubal's until somebody does that. Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you just went over a lot of things that I was gonna mention. Just between Tarek and Crochet, Garrett also made one more start because Tarek didn't pitch the last Sunday in Boston because he was set up to pitch Tuesday since they clinched. He wouldn't have got the innings because they were like 195 to 205, or the strikeouts because I believe it was like 14 behind. I think if I remember correctly, I think it was like 241, 255. But yeah, I mean, I ultimately, of course, I think Tarek did deserve it. It was more of my point that just it's unbelievable that someone was that much better on a year that Garrett had, right? Was really my point.
Crazy.
And even 26-4 were the votes. But you're right to your point and Nico's points. I mean, Tarek was just, the K percentage was low. He didn't walk as many and things like that. So I mean, it's very nitpicky. And even ERA plus, Tarek had that led the major, or not the majors, but the AL. And yeah, I mean, as far as nationally, that was pretty much a slam dunk. And to your point, Jason, I mean, I think Paul just killed that whole wins conception, as you just mentioned. Do we really even pay attention to that anymore? I think officially no, because I mean, kind of like to how you guys spoke about the Dodgers, especially Jason, you're saying about 2 years in a row didn't it? I mean, like, who's betting against Paul not winning the Cy Young next year?
Yeah.
I'm not. You know what I mean?
Absolutely not. No, unless he just gets.
I mean, the guy is about Garrett being. I mean, even younger. And yeah, I mean, him staying there, that I guess bleeds into a point that I don't know if we're going to get to today or not. The whole salary cap thing and just what it is for teams like Pittsburgh, and even. I mean, I understand that they can do some things to improve themselves, but they're never going to be the Dodgers. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, you think that he has 2 years max in Pittsburgh left because that's when his arbitration ends, and it'd be similar. It's similar to where the Detroit is at with Tarek. It's like,
Yep.
do you trade him before his last year or not? But it's a little different because, first of all, the contract's going to be different because Paul's 2 years younger, and by then you're talking $500,000 for Paul at least, probably.
Well, yeah, we discussed this. I know Bruce had strong opinions on. Bruce was in favor of them trading Skeens, if I remember correctly, and not necessarily even waiting until next year, but just
Right.
get a good offer. My thing is, if you're the Pirates, if you're not going to try to win, then it doesn't matter. If you're going to trade him for prospects that might work out one day, but you're not focused on building a winning team, then I would just keep Skeens and get the ticket sales until he has to leave, and then you lose him. If you're not interested in winning, which it doesn't feel like Pirates ownership is, then I don't see the point in making a move because Skeens brings people to the ballpark at least once every 5 days. And if the team's underperforming, at least you got the Skeens night. You can have Skeens bobblehead. You can have Skeens t-shirt night. You can have Livy Dunn t-shirt night, whatever. But once you lose that, what's the motivation for Pirates fans except for that beautiful ballpark they have? What's their motivation to go see this team? And if you trade for prospects that you're never going to try to build a team around, I just don't know. Nico, you got any final thoughts there before we talk MVP?
Yeah, real quick. A couple of years ago, Ohtani was an Angel, right? And they had an opportunity to deal him, and they didn't. Yep. Right? They elected to keep him for the rest of that season, where he was obviously going to become a free agent. When you look back, they should have traded him because he wasn't going to resign with the Angels, no matter how much they try to convince themselves of that. And look what happened. The Angels traded Ohtani. They got nothing for it. They got nothing when he was there, and they got nothing for him. Yeah. So with Skeens, again, I don't want to, we can talk about this, for the next hour, but I just think that, they got two, they got to decide. Do we try to convince Skeens to stay and do something that's uncharacteristic and give him a long-term contract, or you trade him? That's it. You got to get something for him.
Yeah, I mean, and I kind of feel about the Angels like I do the Pirates, though. Are the Angels interested in actually winning? I'm not sure. I mean, they had those two generational players, and they really never built anything around them. It's really sad. I think Ohtani's been pretty good since he left.
Yeah.
I think he's done all right. Well, Speaking of Ohtani, sorry, Nico, you got something else?
Well, they have Anthony Rendon, the Angels. That's
part-time. Less than part-time. So, Ohtani segue, MVPs, no surprises here. I'll say my piece real quick. I kind of mentioned it earlier. Obviously, Ohtani, look, I think he's both exposed and somewhat underexposed at the same time. He gets a lot of media attention. We all know that. People get tired of him because of that. On the other hand, do we really appreciate what the guy's doing? We haven't seen anybody do this. If you want to say Babe Ruth, that was 100 years ago in a different time, in a different era. This guy's doing things that nobody has seen in the modern era of baseball. And I think there's a little bit of anti-Ohtani because of the team he plays for. I don't mean it in a necessarily a racist way, but I do think there are people that hold him being Japanese against him. And then I think they just get tired of hearing about him. And then there's the whole gambling thing, which I think is stupid at this point. But I just think we need to appreciate what Shohei Ohtani is and what he does. And he seems to be a really good guy who respects the game. He respects his teammates. He respects his opponents. Him and Freddie Freeman may be the most likable guys playing on a team that 90%, I think, of the country hates, which is really weird, right? They're super likable guys. So I think Ohtani is super deserving. I like Kyle Schwarber. I wish the Braves would go get Kyle Schwarber, put him as DH, and let him mash at Truist. But I do think Ohtani's the guy. The American League is the one that I just feel like I said it earlier. You've got to look at it as not just stats. And look, Aaron Judge is amazing. He's amazing. He's fun to watch. He's a generational player. But what Cal Raleigh did this year, we said this midseason, Nico. We talked about this with Bruce. If Raleigh gets them to the playoffs, he's got to be your guy. He's got to be the guy. I think the Yankees had a legitimate shot at making the playoffs if Aaron Judge was hurt the second half of the season. I think the Yankees still could have made the playoffs. The Mariners have no shot if Cal Raleigh gets hurt. None. It was 17-13 in first place vote, so it was pretty close. I just think you've got it. This was Cal Raleigh's year. Not to take anything away from Judge, and I'm sure I'll get angry comments from Yankees fans, but I just think it was his year. Nico, we'll let you go. Since you're the Mariners fan, we'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, I think with, I as a fan of the team, I would have voted for Judge. I think that,
dude, you
again, I know
completely obliterated my whole argument.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just bow out now.
I think if both guys were absent, towards the stretch of the season, I think you can make an argument that both teams could have struggled at the finish. Look, the rarity of what Cal did was unbelievable. It was historic to be able to hit 60 home runs as a catcher at the catcher position. I think the reason why he lost the MVP award was because of the batting average. I think there was just a huge gap between the two. I think that played a big factor in the voting. But look, man, 17 votes for Judge, 13 votes for Cal. It was close. It was competitive. I think Cal got some respect in that regard. The likelihood of Cal having another season like that is very low. It's going to be very hard to repeat that, whereas Judge does it every season. So I think it was a very close competitive call. I would have been thrilled if Cal won it. I'm not not upset that Judge won it. And then with the National League, I feel like, Schwarber had a great year. I really would have liked to see him get some votes. I think it was a little bit disrespectful that Schwarber didn't even get a single vote. I understand Ohtani, and, he's the unicorn of our time, and the stats speak for themselves. He hits and he pitches. But I would like to see Schwarber get a couple votes, man. I think he had a great season. I think he put that team on his back throughout the whole season. I think you can make an argument that, hey, if Schwarber wasn't there, I don't know if the Phillies would have had that, 90-plus win season. So, look, I'm in agreement with both picks. Curious where Josh is at on this one. I would have voted for Judge, and I would have voted for Ohtani, but I think Schwarber should have got some votes.
I don't disagree there. Josh, I just want you to know you'll be on the show next week, and Nico will not. But that's okay.
Fair enough.
Josh, your thoughts?
Fair enough. Yeah. Obviously, Ohtani. It's just so hard because I do agree with what Jason said. It's like we feel that he's so overemphasized or overplayed, whatever adjective you want to use. But yet also I feel it's not, because it's just doing what he did is unbelievable. It really is. Considering, he obviously at the plate, he had 1,000 OPS. He led the MLB in run. He had a 7.7 WAR. He led the NL in slug. And he also goes out there. Because of injury, he would have pitched more, right, if not injured. But he goes out there. He pitches 14 games. 47 innings pitched, a 1 WHIP, and a 2.87 ERA with what I think it's 62 strikeouts in those 47 innings.
Yeah.
Kyle was great, no doubt. Obviously, led the MLB in RBIs. Right. And I agree with Nico's point that 240 batting average. I forget what year it was, but that would have been the lowest, that 240 for it, and this applies to him and Cal, would have been the lowest batting average since in a long, long time.
A very long time. I posted that stat and I
talked about it.
Yeah.
It was a long time. So it's almost like, okay. And the thing is like I spoke about, those voters are funny. It's like, it's just like the Hall of Fame. It's like president, like you're making a case for them in a courtroom, right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, if we haven't had a MVP winner since 19 whatever it was, then he can't win because he only hit 240 or he only hit 247 is what I believe Cal hit, right? So it's hard. Again, going against Shohei is a whole nother animal when the guy is, going out there and pitching on top of doing what he did at the plate. Um, the Cal and Aaron Judge thing, I I would have voted for Aaron Judge. But man, it's like something that you can talk yourself out of 5 seconds later. And yeah, it should have been.
Yeah, look,
You could have been like, and that's why. I mean, if you're looking at just stats, Judge led the MLB in WAR, batting average, on base percentage, slugging, and OPS.
yes,
When you say that to yourself, that's daunting.
absolutely.
To
And
say,
I want to be clear. I'm
get it.
certainly not against Judge winning the award. Like he deserves it. He absolutely deserves it.
Right.
I just think when you look at the context of one season,
Mm-hmm.
this felt like Cal Raleigh's year. By the way, just to so the fans know, the lowest previous batting average for a MVP non-pitcher was 1947. I lost it. Hang on. Stats. Sorry, 1944. Marty Marion, the great Marty Marion, in 1944 batted 267 for the Cardinals. He had a 4.5 WAR that year and won the MVP award. So it would have been the lowest batting average ever for an MVP winner. Either way, yeah.
Right. And that leads to my point, and this is always the conversation almost every year, right? Well, is it the best offensive player or is it the most valuable player? Because I agree with Jason, there's a difference in that. There's a difference in that question. What do because yes, 100%. If Cal played 159 games catching, that's insane. Whether even if some were at DH, I know that, but that's still insane. Day in, day out, the grind from April till, and even though the postseason doesn't matter, but April till September.
And by the way, Josh, let me say this too, because Nico kind of made a point. If it was truly the most valuable player to that team in that season, then you can make a case that Kyle Schwarber was more valuable to his team than Ohtani. Ohtani still has a team with Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts and Will Smith and all these Teoscar Hernandez. They would have still been a very good baseball team. A championship team, I don't know, but they would have been a very good baseball team. Without Schwarber, like Nico said, the Phillies probably don't even make the playoffs.
Probably not. I agree with that. And again, that's the question. Well, and in Shohei's, I guess you could also say, is it the best offensive end pitcher, which is the thing, right? But again, I think with Schwarber, I don't know. I think we just saw. I think Cal is the proof of that. If your average is in the 240s, I don't know what you can do.
Yeah,
I guess is my kind of point on that. And it speaks to Kyle as well. With Shohei or not, I just don't know what you can do. Maybe if Shohei didn't exist, or just half of him existed, and it was just the hitter. I don't even know if the thing is maybe it's not unanimous, but I really don't think, and it might get me in trouble on Bruce, but I don't know that he beats Shohei, even if Shohei's just hitting.
No, I agree.
It's not unanimous.
Right.
Probably.
Right? Yeah, but you're right.
I don't know if he wins.
Ohtani still would have won.
Absolutely. Right. I think so. I think we saw that with how the people voting reacted between Judge and Cal.
Yeah. No, I think, look, the reason MVP awards exist, I believe, is so people have these discussions, because ultimately they don't matter that much. Every sport, we have this debate. I think the NBA has always been the worst about giving it to just the best player. And now baseball is kind of doing the same thing. I really wish they would just take a step back and say, if this is truly the most valuable player, I think you have to not disregard, but the batting average. Does anybody care that Cal Raleigh batted 247? The guy carried his baseball team to the playoffs. But again, Judge, very deserving. I'm not saying he wasn't, but great debate, great stuff. Nico, any final thoughts before we wrap that up, and we'll go on to something?
No, like Josh said, it's like, if you your hunch says you would, vote for Judge, but you can easily be talked out of it because of what Cal did and the degree of difficulty and really just the historic season. But again, I agree with the two picks. I just would have liked to see a little bit more respect for Schwarber with a couple picks for him, because I think he had a great season.
I think one X factor would have pushed Cal Raleigh over the top, and that is being a catcher. Had he played in Atlanta, had he played in Tampa this year where they're outdoor, somewhere where it's, if you catch that many games outdoors in the heat and you survive and you bat that way and get your team to the playoffs, you would have to have given that guy the MVP award. So I'm blaming Seattle weather right here and now. I'm saying it's Seattle weather. It's Seattle weather's fault that Cal Raleigh didn't win MVP. All right. I don't know if we want to get too deep into this next topic because this could take a while. So let's talk about it, guys. But let's remember we got a whole off season, and especially Josh and Bruce. And for those who don't know, because none of you listening know, we have a group chat on our Facebook page. Josh is one of our admins. Nico's an admin. Bruce is an admin. And Josh and Bruce have the best back and forth debates. We'll call them debates, discussions. They had a very long one the other day, touching on the subject we're about to get into a little bit. So, guys, again, let's don't turn this into a 3-hour episode. We very easily could here. The Dodgers are now back-to-back World Series champs, and good for them. The Dodgers have played by the rules. They have done they haven't cheated that we know of. But what they've done with their contracts and spending money is all perfectly legal within the current economic system of baseball. And it's hard to win 2 World Series back-to-back. I don't care how much money you spend and what you do. Hard to do. They did it. But the question we want to ask here is this bad for baseball? We got a lockout looming, folks. I know nobody wants to talk about the negative. I certainly don't. It's somebody who loves the game and lived through the 1994 strike. This could be bad. This could be ugly. But the Dodgers are kind of putting ammo into the owners' pockets here. Teams who spend more have a better chance of winning. That's just the way it is. You can look at the last 20 or so World Series champions, and most of them are in the top 10 in payroll. There are some exceptions to that. Certainly the 2015 Royals come to mind. I believe the 2021 Braves were like 13th or 14th. But for the most part, you've got a much better shot. I mean, the Blue Jays were the underdogs, and they were the 5th highest payroll in MLB this year, right? So I guess the first question I want you guys to answer, we're going to start with Josh this time, just to change it up. Is this bad for baseball? Are the Dodgers bad for baseball? And me and Nico talked about this earlier, Josh, just him and I. What if they three-peat heading into this labor strife that we could have in 2027? And how negatively could that affect things? Because the owners are going to push for salary cap. We know that's coming. The players have always said absolutely not. So, Josh, your thoughts just all around on this situation. Are the Dodgers bad for baseball? Where are we headed with the lockout? And what if we lead into that with the Dodgers three-peat?
Yeah, I don't think the Dodgers specifically, or just them, are bad for baseball. I mean, they're doing things within their rights. They're not breaking any rules. And also, I mean, they spent $350. Cohen and the Mets, even though they didn't execute well, were right behind them at 342. So, plenty of teams that are. I think the Yankees were at 300. So, I mean, there's plenty of teams spending here. So I don't necessarily think it's just the Dodgers here. Where the problem that and I have some things on this, and I won't necessarily go into everything this second, but it's the top and the bottom. If you want to say the top 10 spending teams and the bottom 10 the gap is only widening between that. So I'm not even looking at it in a vice where, it's just the Dodgers, or it's just the the Rays or the Pirates or whoever the least spending team is that specific year, whatever year you want to look at.
Those are both good guesses.
Right.
Yeah.
But to me, it's more, you have to look at it more like I look at kind of the top average, and I have some numbers on that and the bottom 10 to say, okay, where are we headed in the last decade? You mentioned last year. I mean, yes, like, okay, the 15 Royals, yep, they were 13th. They were 13th in payroll. Probably people thought they were lower, right?
I would have thought lower, absolutely.
Right. They were 13th. The Astros were 17th in 2017, but I mean that was kind of a dynasty in waiting, so that was then the only other those are the two that are out of the top 10 that have won it in the last 11 World Series. The only two. And obviously none since 2018. So that gets to one of my points here. It's only getting worse. Okay. Now, yes, like Bruce mentioned, well, Cleveland made it in 2016. They did. And even the Mets were 17th in payroll when the Royals beat them in 2015. Okay. But other than that, even making the World Series, the D-backs were 21st 2 years ago. And if you want to count the COVID year, which I think that's an odd year to count, because money buys depth, and depth over 60 games is a whole lot different than depth over 162. Okay. So since 2016, other than the COVID year, we've had no team outside the top 10 even make the World Series. Even make it, lose.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay. So, and to my next point, again, I don't want to hog it here, and I'll let you or Nico go here. One last kind of just perception I want people to think about. In 2016, the bottom 10 payroll averaged 84.9 million. Okay. The top 10 averaged 189.7 million. Okay. 2025, the bottom 10 averaged 98.2 million. The 2025 top 10 averaged 265 million. Okay. Now, that is a 23, it's a 170% increase from the top 10 from 25 to 2000, from the, the 2016 top 10 to the 2025 top 10.
Wow.
Versus a 23% versus 123% increase from the bottom 10. So I mean, or I'm sorry, yeah. So I mean, they're just not, the bottom 10 isn't. That's my whole point. That we are slowly eliminating a third of the league, whether we like to admit it or not. Is there a perfect answer? Probably not. Just like with any governing body, the government of the United States, if you're on one side, you think this is perfect. If you're on the other side, you think this is perfect, and there's just no way of coming in the middle.
Yeah, definitely.
I do think there are some things that can be done to give those bottom 10 a chance, and to our point that we spoke to earlier. So we aren't sitting here 3 years before Paul Skeens is a free agent, basically knowing that he is not going to be a Pittsburgh Pirate and that he's going to go somewhere else. I think that's wrong.
I agree. Yeah.
3 years ahead of time that a generational talent that Pittsburgh was able to get, it's bad for baseball, and obviously specifically for Pittsburgh Pirate fans that they know that he's going to go. And I'll also admit I probably have a little bit of bias because I'm in a situation here with Tarek Skubal and the Tigers. Tigers aren't as small as Pittsburgh, and I think there's a somewhat small fighting chance, but it's the name of it's the same thing.
Well, I think the biggest difference between those two franchises, real quick, is the Tigers actually want to win. I'm not sure the Pirates do.
Agree.
But I think you brought up a great point, because I was thinking along the lines of, not that the Dodgers are bad for baseball in general, but more like because of the upcoming battle between the owners and players that we know is on the horizon. The Dodgers winning adds more fuel to the fire for the owners who say, look, we need a salary cap, or the Dodgers are going to win every year, right? On the flip side, and you made me think about this because when you talked about politics, on the flip side, let's say Milwaukee had won the World Series this year, then the players would have had more ammo to say, hey, look, you don't have to spend all this money. We don't need a salary cap. The small market Brewers won the World Series. So really, it doesn't matter which side, I guess. But I do think public perception matters in these labor disagreements. And if the Dodgers go into that 2027 potential lockout or strike situation, having won 3 consecutive, public perception will be, oh, Major League Baseball has got a huge problem spending too much money. They got to fix this, which will play into the owner's hand very nicely. Because I can tell you from running the Facebook page and seeing the comments, it feels like there's a large percentage of fans who will blame, the spending, but they'll actually blame it more on the players. Like the owners can say no. Of course, Bruce brought up a great point. If they do, then they get accused of collusion. But they don't have to hand out these exorbitant contracts. So I don't know the perfect answer either, but I thought it was a good point, Josh. I hadn't thought about the flip side of that. Let's just say the Brewers or the Guardians had won the World Series, then the players would be like, So either way, Nico, take it away. What are your thoughts there?
I want to say thanks to Josh for doing some math on the episode tonight. That was awesome.
Absolutely, yes.
Look, are the Dodgers winning back-to-back titles bad for baseball? I think it's the timing couldn't be worse. I think that's the problem. With the looming lockout in 27. God forbid. Well, not God forbid, but if the Dodgers do three-peat, which looks definitely possible, then it's going to, like Jason said, put even more ammo into the discussion. But look, I mean, Josh hit on this. The Mets have spent a ton of money, right? And they're going to go out there and spend even more money. They're super aggressive. The top 5 payrolls in baseball are, it's pretty close. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but you have several organizations that are big spenders. So are the Dodgers, playing by the rules? Yes. They're not doing anything wrong, to our knowledge. I think if you're not a fan of the Dodgers, you're probably getting frustrated that, they are going back to back and they just have a star-studded lineup. But if they do introduce a salary cap in 27, my argument is, and like Josh said, are the bottom tier teams going to change their mentality and spend? I don't think so. I think the Marlins and the Pirates and the A's and the Rockies and so on, I think that they're just going to live in that bottom third of payrolls in baseball. So it's all about what's the happy medium, right? What's going to please both sides. I don't have an answer to that. I'm not really sure. But I think the Dodgers are doing all the right things. They're obviously spending a ton of money. They have a unicorn of a player, the Babe Ruth of our time in Ohtani, whether you like him or not. And they also have a top 5 farm system in baseball. So they're kind of doing everything right at the moment. And it's aggravating the rest of us who are fans of, smaller market teams, or even, Toronto, who's got the 5th highest payroll in baseball. So, are they ruining the game? Are they ruining the game at the moment? It feels like it, but, I don't think that, we can fault them for doing all the right things. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. And, I like what Josh said, the gap between the top spenders versus the bottom spenders, it's just continuing to widen. The Marlins, for example, they're never going to be, a contender. They've shown no signs of it. So what's the happy medium? I'm not sure. Jason, like you said, hopefully cooler heads prevail and we can come up with a better resolution. But one thing I don't like about, and Josh said it too, you have Paul Skeens, and we've spent a lot of time talking about him this evening. He's not gonna. I don't think he'll be a Pirate. And he'll probably end up in a big market. And it's unfortunate. Mike Trout was kind of the one guy that stayed in Anaheim for. He's still an Angel. he could have went on somewhere. He didn't have to sign that extension, and he's having a very disappointing career in with the Angels. So I'm not really sure, man. I don't think they're ruining baseball, but I think the timing of it couldn't be any worse.
No, I agree. I'll make 3 quick points here as we wrap this up here pretty soon. But one, the Dodgers didn't always offer the most money to some of these free agents, but these free agents wanted to go play for the Dodgers with that team, and you can't blame them. Who wouldn't want to go play with that team? But they've created a great culture there. And so that's just one point I wanted to make quickly. And I'm not one to defend the Dodgers, but it just makes the point that it's not all about the money. 2, this is the worst possible thing that can happen to baseball if there's a significant labor dispute that causes games to be missed. You mentioned it earlier, Nico, on our other show we were recording. Baseball's in a good place right now. It's in a very good place. A lot of superstars, a lot of talent. The postseason is probably beyond compared to any other postseason in excitement and interest. I was at the All-Star game this year. I mean, that was an amazing event for a fan. I mean, just they're in a really good place. Don't screw this up, Don't screw this up, baseball. People came back after 1994, but it took a few years. And if we didn't have the obviously drug-fueled home run race, I'm not sure a lot of people would have come back when they did. There's no guarantee that people will come back to this. If you miss a significant portion, especially if you miss another World Series, God forbid, baseball, don't do this. Don't do this. And then lastly, I will say this, and I don't know if this would take an act of the federal government. I don't know what we can believe and what we can't believe. The players always say they're lying. I want to know how much money the owners make, how much each team has left over at the end of the day. What is your profit? I want to know. The owners say they're losing money. The players say they're liars. Somebody needs to get to the bottom of it because that really answers a lot of questions. I mean, I want to know, are these teams actually losing millions of dollars like they say they are? Because if they are, then that might change my outlook as a fan. It's not going to affect anything, but it's going to change my perception of it. But if they're actually making money and telling us they're losing money, it's amazing to me. This whole thing is amazing to me as I prep my Black Sox series coming up, because that was in 1920 and owners and players were fighting just like this. I mean, it's the same thing, and we're 100 years later and still doing it. So I want to give you guys a chance for final thoughts. You got anything you want to end with? Doesn't have to be about that. And then we'll wrap this thing up. We've got probably a good hour episode here already. So we're going to talk free agency this offseason, guys. We're going to talk more about what we observed this season. We're going to talk about hot stove. We're going to talk about picks for next year. But wrap it up. Josh, you got any final thoughts on your first show? And good job, bud.
Yeah. Well, first, you know what? I'm going to give breaking baseball news on my first show. Josh Naylor and the Seattle Mariners are finalizing a 5-year contract.
How about it?
Jeff Passan. According to Jeff Passan. So listeners, if it's wrong, Jeff Passan, email him, not me.
Jeff is rarely wrong.
But exactly.
Jeff is rarely wrong.
But I'd give that. Secondly, want to clear up so when I was speaking to those numbers, I misspoke. I want to make sure I'm right.
Yeah.
Jason doesn't get hate mail. Since 2016, the bottom 10 has had a 16% increase. Top 10 has had a 40% increase.
There you go.
So what I'm trying to explain is that they are not mirroring each other.
Right.
And what that is going to do is going to keep the separation just growing exponentially from basically a third of the league. And I picked 10 teams to basically try to say yes, because I know we've talked about it in the chat. Some teams don't try as hard as they should.
Right.
I figured 10 was a pretty good sample, but yeah, to kind of just show that something does need to be done. What that is I guess we'll find out. And I agree with your point. I really should have probably hit on that too, but I don't know that baseball can take another whole season. People, times are different. There's so much else going on and other things that they do. I think it's going to be hard to get the fans back if they do that. So
well, and by the way, let's just throw on top. We'll get into this later too, but there's also this And maybe it's just to two players, but there's also this gambling thing going on with the two
I
garbage
know. Yeah,
pitchers.
right.
So
Right.
baseball is walking a fine line here between, hey, these could be the golden years and this could be a disaster. So, Nico, your final thoughts, buddy, and we'll wrap it up.
Just want to confirm that Jeff Passan did just tweet that. That's awesome. That's a great start for the offseason for the Mariners. I knew Josh loved playing in Seattle. You just never know with free agency. There's a lot of emotions at the end of the season, and you aren't quite sure if some of these guys are, if their heart is still with the team that they last were playing for. Specifically, Bo Bichette. That's one guy that I'm interested to see where he goes, because I feel like he's going to have a lot of suitors, and I'm not convinced he's going back to Toronto. But no, man, I just want to say that, great having Josh on, great adding him to the team. And I'm looking forward to the off season. I think this is going to be, there's a ton of good players out there. One thing I really want to touch on real quick is curious to see, outside of the household names, the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Mets, which other teams are going to be aggressive this winter? Are we going to see Baltimore, spend and go out there and try to improve their team? Is Atlanta going to, I know Jason's got a passionate opinion on this.
Please.
Is Atlanta? I'm telling you, man, they got to go out there and they got to go get Bo Bichette. I'm telling you,
I'd love it. I'd love it.
It's a perfect fit. They need a shortstop. I know he wants. He said he wants to stay in Toronto with Vladdy. Maybe he will, but they got to go out there, man. They got to go out there and get Bo Bichette. Dylan Cease, Michael King. There's a lot of good players out there, and I'm just looking forward to the hot stove season. And I'm so happy the Mariners were the first ones to go out there and make a big move. That's awesome.
Yeah, good stuff, Josh. Thanks for bringing the breaking news. I think that's the first time we've ever had breaking news on the podcast.
Hey, I got lucky. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, well done, man. Well done. We'll look forward to having you again. So we'll wrap this up. Listeners, I think I haven't said this to Nico or anybody. I think we'll take the next couple weekends off for Thanksgiving. I got to finish the Black Sox podcast. I'm still in the middle of that. That's deep. So we'll take a couple weeks. We'll see what happens in between, if anything, other than Josh Naylor. And then we'll come back with a hot stove episode. We're going to talk free agency. We're going to talk about which teams can get better and how, and look forward to 2026. So, guys, thanks again. And until then, we'll see you at the ballpark.